And so now we're going to hear from Ruth, who's going to talk about a field of wheat. When I think I'd only met Ruth a year or two before she started this project, and I was really intrigued and inspired by how art could be used as a way of engaging people with these fundamentals that underpin our life. You know, where does the grain that we eat come from, and what is the kind of economic and political and social context for that? So without further ado, Ruth Levene.
Thank you, Camilla, and thank you, Johnny. That's so exciting. So inspiring. That's I want to see it happening. So I've just shared my screen. Can you all see that, and can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay. So Johnny, you mentioned about sort of not knowing about the growing process and somehow being disconnected, and that's exactly how I felt. So along with another artist, Anne-Marie Culhane, we set about doing this project called A Field of Wheat, and it did happen quite a while ago, so I'm a little bit rusty, so I've got out a few notes and going to read a few bits, and there's quite a lot of information, so I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to whiz through a lot of slides and a lot of info, but please do visit the website or ask me questions at the end if it's just too much. So we worked with a farmer called Peter Lundgren, who's been farming for over 35 years, and he's got 100 acres in Lincolnshire, and he grows wheat, barley, rapeseed and sugar beet. So with A Field of Wheat, we wanted to essentially explore and understand and reveal the connections between food systems, so the culture, the land, the global markets, the environment, and also as a way to sort of explore if we could connect the consumer to the producer. So we invited 42 people onto a collective and asked them to share the financial risk and some of the key decision-making processes within growing the field of wheat. So each of them invested £200 in 22-acre field and promised to take part in a year of events, decisions and discussions alongside Peter, who actually grew the field of wheat. So Peter classes himself as a conventional farmer. He uses agrochemicals and artificial fertilizers. I'll just see if I can change this slide. Sorry. Yeah, okay. So the wheat we grew was a winter variety called JB Diego, one of a limited variety of wheat classified by the Agricultural and Horticultural Development Board. And it's classed as a hard feed wheat, which was suitable for Peter's land. And essentially, which means it's most likely to be sold for animal feed. It's certainly not likely to go for commercial bread. So this was not an organic farming story. What we wanted to do was engage people in the story of wheat, which is the 95% of wheat which is grown in this country. So we wanted to sort of open a window into kind of what goes on for the most part in order to sort of have that discussion and see if there's an alternative way. So on the collective, members ranged from, well, we had the head of agriculture from Barclays Bank, we had a land agency advisor, a local baker, an architect and his family, local Quakers, food systems experts, heritage wheat grower, crop researcher, academics, and many, many more. So together as a collective, we looked at things quite closely. We looked inwards at the soil health, seed coatings, water systems, and much more widely at the global markets, the price of wheat, and the weather. We explored and played with ideas around culture, plough plays, rituals, old and new. We looked at the historical, so the ancient creeks and the draining of the fens, the technical, the nitrogen fertilizer, growth hormones, agri-tech business, the environmental, monocultures, carbon, water, biodiversity and climate change. and the economic, pit trading, futures markets, the corn exchange, and the global grain markets. So Middlefield, which you can see a kind of map of here, for us was a frame, essentially, a pictorial frame to look through and a place to really root ourselves, to keep going back to. It's 22 acres, and it was one of three fields at Peter Farms in Branston Booths, Lincolnshire, which is 7 miles east of Lincoln. So we designed this slide, this image that you can see now, for the collective, and what it shows is all of the events and all of the activities that made up the year-long project. So the duration of the project was based on how long it took to grow, harvest and sell a field of winter wheat, and went from October 2015 to September 2016. The events within the year were shaped around the seasons and the growth of the wheat, and we designed 4 main events. So the first happened on the farm and focused on soil, carbon and the history of the land, and then the collective actually got to meet the farmer in person. The second, we went on a day trip to London and looked at the history of trading wheat and the current day systems of selling. This is Peter. The third event was back on the farm and focused on biodiversity, water and the actual process of growing wheat. It's us giving a lecture on water drainage. And the final harvest event happened over a period of 2 days and took place in a local village hall and a Quaker meeting house and back on the farm. So key to our learning was how we chose to share knowledge. So most of the people that presented in our events were already on the collective, and occasionally we asked extra people in, such as from Anglian Water or Friends of the Earth, to share specialist knowledge that nobody had. So being out in the field was quite important to us, as was describing the facts of how things work. And as anyone involved in wheat knows, there's a lot of detail. You could just go on forever. We were really mindful to try and give equal value to experiencing and sensing and being. So there was occasional moments for work and then time off to simply just be amongst the wheat. We recreated old ways. We sometimes simply asked them to stop and collectively listen. Meals were very central to every meeting that we had. Went on for a long time. When the collective were back home, we sent them reminders of Middlefield that they could smell and feel. And we posted online the stages of the wheat growth that they were missing. So Anne-Marie would draw the roots, take samples and draw the roots as they grew, and I would photograph the ears as they grew, and then they were posted online. And we had a dedicated website for the whole project, and one of the pages had a live data feed to the farm, so showing the weather, and also a live data feed to the current global price of wheat. But if you pressed on these buttons at the bottom, it would compare it to the price of wheat last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, so you had some kind of comparison. So dialogue was, well, the conversation amongst the collective was really the heart of the project. The point of this was to share knowledge and to communicate with each other. And as the collective was scattered across the UK and abroad, we had to embrace the internet. So we worked closely with a group of Quakers, adapting their methods of collective decision-making and dialogue for our own purpose. And this became kind of the real heart of the project. So we had 2 different kinds of group dialogues. The first were collective inquiries, which were a chance to reflect on a certain provocation, like the one in this slide. So the provocation's quite long, I won't read it out, but we would always end with a quote, and in this case, it was now more than ever, nature cannot be separated from culture. We had quite a rigorous structure and set of guidelines for the online inquiries. They started at 5 a.m. in the morning. They finished at 1 a.m. the next day. We were there throughout the whole time, and every member had to book a 30-minute slot in which they would reflect and on the provocation and then write a response, which we would then post online, and that would accumulate over the day. And then the second type of dialogue was based around real farming decisions that the collective had to make. So through a series of really carefully staged discussions resulting finally in a vote, the collective were responsible for deciding if and how much nitrogen fertilizer to put on the crop. They also decided on what to do with the wheat and who to sell it to. So earlier in the year, we'd organised a day in London where we'd learnt about the evolution of wheat trading. And we'd heard from a trader from Goldman Sachs who talked about the futures market. We heard from an organic trader who deals directly with farmers, an ex-trader, and the ex-director of the Homegrown Cereals Authority came along and talked as well. So all of that really helped give us some knowledge about what happens, how it works, and gave us the opportunity to decide how we wanted to sell our wheat. So at the end, there was the celebration, of course. So at harvest time, we managed to get just shy of 80 tonnes, which is what we aimed for, which we were very surprised we got, partly due to the nitrogen fertiliser decision to make. We'd even made a profit of £10.99p each, which was quite a miracle. We were very, very mindful to try and not get anyone's hopes up. We assumed we'd make a loss, but we didn't. The wheat was loaded onto lorries. So we had 3 of these lorries, not entirely full, but 3. And they were sent to its final destination, which surprisingly was all in the UK. Some went to ADM Mill in Corby for milling into biscuit flour, and some went for chicken feed. So the collective had voted for a small amount of flour, relative terms small, depends on the projects that you're talking about, but this was only, this was 100 kilograms to be milled at a relatively local windmill called Heckington Windmill. The flour of which the collective bagged up, and they took a bag each for a memento. And we designed the labels of the bags to have all of the list of inputs that went into the growing of the wheat. So the fertilizers, the growth hormones, and all of those things that had been used. Something that's not, or certainly wasn't then, needed on commercial labels sold in the supermarket. So the architects that were on the collective built us a straw baled structure from the straw that we grew, and then we put a roof on it, and we held 2 days of presentations and reflections. And then we had rituals. So this is Anne-Marie, worked for many years with people who make corn dollies, and she's evolved her own corn mask. So this was a performance ritual that took place. And that field was the field where we grew the wheat. We had collective performances. This is something that I was very interested in, to do with seeing and blindfolds and navigating the land. They are actually the wheat sacks that took the small amount of wheat to Heckington Mill. And we feasted on the bread and the cakes baked from our flour. So Peter had actually grown JB Diego before, and he has his own little hand grinder, so he's already baked a loaf of bread from JB Diego. So, and it's all right, but we didn't have too much. So I'll just leave you with this slide. So the website for the project is still live. And if you're really interested in the details, all of the collective inquiry discussions, including the live one, which was recorded by audio, but all of the text-based ones are still all there. All of the decision-making process. There, we asked Peter to write a diary, an farmer's almanac every month. So there's a lot of stuff on there if you're interested. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Have a little. That was fantastic. Thank you, Ruth.